The citizens of Canada need to know that we are being subjected to a soft revolution, and it's being done through DEI bureaucracy. And we're paying for it. So we're being subjugated by our own tax dollars to the tune of just billions and billions of dollars, because every institution in Canada now has a whole layer of middle management called DEI, and they enforce ideological conformity, and they punish and expel dissidents.
Here in Cobourg, Ontario, I'm Tamara Ugolini for Rebel News, joined alongside Cheryl Gould, who is a fired Ontario Catholic teacher that is now facing revocation of her teaching license for the crime of being satirically critical of the radical ideologies that are infiltrating
publicly funded schools through things like critical race theory and what's known as SOGI 123, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Gould did these criticisms and critiques on social media through a pseudonym that was never tied directly to her name, any of her colleagues, or any of her students.
You were fired in 2022. You're now facing revocation of your teaching license altogether.
After nearly 2 decades of high school teaching experience with a clear teaching record. Having taught at inner-city schools within the Toronto Catholic District School Board, Gould specialized in alternative education and became especially involved in teaching those of different backgrounds and capabilities, including highly sensitive youth facing life challenges with histories of mental illness or trauma. Gould never so much as had a complaint from a parent or a student on file, yet all of that changed in 2021 when she spoke out in a union meeting.
What happened was in 2021 during COVID, we had a Zoom meeting, and staff meetings typically end with a union meeting. Mm-hmm. So in the union meeting portion of that staff meeting, I used the time that is allotted for members to bring forward their concerns to raise some concerns. And that's where the trouble began, because despite the confidentiality that we expect from union meetings, colleagues reported me because they were triggered by what I said. The very first thing I said in that meeting was a question, and I asked if we would be facing vaccine mandates. I was concerned because the Director of Education had sent emails making claims that the vaccines were safe and effective, and I said that that was unethical because nobody knew. There was no long-term safety data, so I didn't think that was proper for us to be receiving that kind of coercion. And then I held up a book that is called So You Want to Talk About Race. And this is a book that the chaplain of our multi-campus school decided to purchase for every teacher in the system. In my 19 years of working in education, I can probably count on one hand how many times I've been gifted, all staff has been gifted with a single book. This book is written by an American Marxist who has spoken about supporting violent left-wing revolution. This book is about talking about race and the appropriate way to talk about race. And there is a guideline in the book, guideline number 8, which says, I'm paraphrasing, this isn't a quote, but it basically says, if you're in a group and you're talking about race and the white members of the group do not toe the line, don't, if they challenge or question your assertions in any way, then you should segregate them into a group of whites only, let them talk amongst themselves, because the purpose of talking about race is essentially the therapeutic value that it confers to victims of white supremacy.
Because I think a lot of times people think that they're forcing me to do this kind of work. Well, we're all doing the work. Yeah. We're all doing the work.
Yeah, and we all have, I'm maybe, I do a lot of work trying to get white people and non-Black people to understand the harm that race does to Black people in America.
I don't think that a book that promotes that sort of messaging should be purchased with tax dollars. So that's what I said. I held up the book and I said, I don't think that this book should be purchased with taxpayer dollars.
We are purposefully kept from useful terminology and discussion tactics because we are told constantly that race lives in the hearts and minds of individuals and racism lives in the hearts and minds of individuals. And there's nothing we can do about it but convince racists to love people of color.
I don't believe in censorship, so I am not against reading a book that I disagree with or somebody promoting a book that I disagree with politically or socially, but I felt that it was a clear effort to politically indoctrinate us if every single staff member was gifted this book by the chaplaincy department. And revolutionary Marxism does not have a history of making society better, even for the marginalized. So I think that this sort of literature, this is the sort of thing that I said in the meeting, that we're faced with ideological capture by Marxist ideology, and that there's a lot of political intimidation going on in the workplace. And at that, somewhere around then, the union rep said, Cheryl, I can't help you with this. You're going to have to talk to the president of our union chapter. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I chose to speak during this meeting because it's the only safe space that I could think of, because the president of the union has the BLM logo in his email signature, as does the campus vice principal. So for someone like me who is dissenting against the prevailing ideology, which is radically far left, there is no place to voice. And so I chose the union meeting because at least there's an expectation of confidentiality when you do air concerns. And the union rep called me about an hour later and she said, you can't talk that way in meetings. And I said, what do you mean? Why not? And she said, I'm getting a lot of complaints. And I said, well, what are they saying? And she said, oh, you know, that you're racist. And so I didn't think too much of it, but that was Friday afternoon, and I got a phone call Monday morning, and I was suspended and subject to an investigation for the months of, the rest of April, May, and June. And then my employment was terminated at the end of June. And they did not terminate me for what I said in the union meeting. They terminated me because after the union meeting, one teacher that I had formerly been friendly with knew of my Facebook account, and she decided to share it with the others so they could group report me. I suppose it would have been hard for them to fire me for what I said in the union meeting, but it certainly wasn't hard for them to fire me for what they saw on my Facebook. Mm-hmm. The College of Teachers is comparing me to one of Canada's most notorious white supremacist neo-Nazis. His name is Frederick Paul Fromm, and he had his license revoked in 2006. And what the counsel for the college said is, this case is essentially the Fromm case 20 years later, but even worse, because she spread her message of intolerance far further than Mr. Fromm could ever reach. The Fromm case echoes exactly what has gone on in this case. political activity by a teacher on the teacher's own time is not okay if the views are contrary to the values of the profession and the system. And any other outcome than revocation would cause the public to lose confidence in the college. She wants to draw the parallel in the content, the activism, the political activism, and the dedication, because what she's saying is that other teachers who have been reprimanded or disciplined for online expressions, the ones that did not get revoked have erased their comments, scrubbed their profiles, abjectly apologized for their expressions, showed a lot of remorse. And I have not shown any remorse. I did plead guilty because some of the language was excessive, but I do not have any remorse for my political activism in general. They feel that it's not just my excesses of language that make me guilty. It's the entirety of my political worldview and my beliefs. And one of the things that the counsel for the OCT said was, because I have these very long articles on Substack, I have in 2022 I published a chapter in the book of a fellow called Scott Venturea, and the book is called Making Sense of Nonsense, and it's about cultural issues of our time. And he asked me to write a chapter about BLM and the anti-racist movement and critical race theory. So I have really dug into these topics and done a lot of research, and I am a published author. I published a book 20 years ago about Indigenous art of the West Coast peoples. On the first day of the hearing, when I saw who the adjudicators are, there are 3 of them, I looked them all up online just to see who they are. And one of them, on her professional Twitter feed, that Twitter feed was full of support for, how should I put it, Black Power Marxism, essentially. So she's clearly an Angela Davis fangirl. She tweeted something where a Black woman judge said essentially that she was going to be Black before a judge, so race above all, even in adjudication. And this is exactly what I extensively write and speak and meme about, is that race should not be placed above all, that individualism is the most important thing. The individual, how does the saying go? The individual is the ultimate minority, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we're being forced to become collectivists through DEI.
Mm-hmm. I want to point out that your commentary and your criticisms are often satirical in nature, and they explicitly denounce racial division and denounce violence, and yet the OCT is claiming you are perpetuating those things.
Yes. So it's clear, even in the very evidence of the case that is in the agreed statement of facts, there are places where I clearly say things like, I support maximum freedom of religion and expression, minimal state interference in these things. I support pluralism, that I could possibly, be satirical of the BLM movement, just in general, that I would mock the BLM movement is considered incredibly harmful.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly, but fires have been started.
It's not the case that I am the extremist, and I'm I need to accept the views of the system and the profession. It's the wording she used. You can't be a political activist if your views go against the system and the profession's views. But when the system and the profession are top-down enforcing and imposing those views on Canadians without our consent, then I think we have a duty to become political activists. And I did not used to be political. I consider myself quite apolitical. And if anything, I was a bit leftist. The citizens of Canada need to know that we are being subjected to a soft revolution, and it's being done through DEI bureaucracy. And we're paying for it. So we're being subjugated by our own tax dollars to the tune of just billions and billions of dollars, because every institution in Canada now has a whole layer of middle management called DEI, and they enforce ideological conformity, and they punish and expel dissidents. So it really is like Maoism with Canadian characteristics. And that's being made really clear in this hearing with the OCT. Why do we even have a Catholic system if we're not going to be proud of and promote our Catholic values, if we're going to throw them under the bus for a Marxist political movement? I find that really objectionable, as I know a lot of other people do. And one of the things we brought into the penalty stage as evidence was Eric Kaufman's study, which is a recent study, and he did a lot of surveying of Canadians to figure out their attitudes. And the reason that we brought that in is to show them that my views essentially represent the silenced majority. And on some of the questions, a very large majority. So when the college argues that, societal values have changed and Cheryl's just not keeping up and so she has to go, that's not true. My values and my criticisms of what the government is doing are representative of the silenced majority.
Anybody who would like to learn more about Cheryl's case or follow her on social media platforms, will show that on the visual part of this report, and I'll also hyperlink in the written component. The Cancelled Club on Substack. And it's CC Harvey, the Cancelled Club on Substack. And I have long articles there, and I'm going to start doing video podcasts with other canceled people. So the first one is going to be with Nicholas DeSanto. Nico DeSanto is coming to Ontario next week, and we have lined up 4 shows. The details are on his Twitter as well as mine. Tickets are on Eventbrite and Yuck Yucks.
Well, yeah, truth is important, and sometimes as a society we have to get along with a collective lie. Like, I've lived in the third world, and they like to tell themselves that their problems are due to colonialism, and they collectively try to believe in that. Oh, damn you, the English, you came here, you colonized us, and we became English speakers, and our country became attractive to foreign investment. And
the proceeds of these shows are actually to fundraise for your legal defense, because this isn't cheap. It's ongoing, as far as I gather. And whatever the outcome will, those next legal steps can be additionally financially burdensome and challenging.
Yes. And I should say that the union is grieving my termination, so they've provided a lawyer for that. When it came to the college case for revocation of my license, they did provide me a lawyer at the beginning, but he said, essentially, you're guilty, and he wouldn't provide a defense for me. So I had to waive my right to to a union paid lawyer for that case. So I am paying my own legal fees.
And you do have a Give, Send, Go also if people can't make it out to these shows to show their financial and their presence support. So we'll link to that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl, and all the best in this endeavor. Please do keep me posted.
Thanks.
For Rebel News in Cobourg, Ontario, I'm Tamara Ugolini. This ideological capture of our publicly funded institutions and our public education systems is exactly why we have launched a special campaign at stopclassroomgrooming.com. At that website, you can catch up on our reports on this subject, you can sign our petition, and you can sign up to our mailing list to make sure that you don't miss our future reports. All of that at stopclassroomgrooming.com.